My name is Fiona, and it is my honour to have been asked to welcome you all to New Haven Fort for this very special day of commemoration. We are here to commemorate and remember the centenary of the first day of the Battle of the Somme. One of the worst days in military history for British forces, the total number of casualties, killed, wounded and missing in action amounted to 60,000 men. 19,240 of whom died on that day and lie still buried in France. We also remember those that were killed between the 1st of July to the 18th of November 1916 as the Battle of the Somme raged on. By the end of the battle, Britain had suffered 420,000 casualties and an estimated 125,000 lives had been lost. 125,000 innocent men lost in just a few months. The scale of such losses is almost too great to comprehend. With such great loss of life, it is hardly surprising that the Battle of the Somme has come to symbolise the tragic futility of the First World War. Its first day of conflict remains the bloodiest day in the history of the British Army, and this huge loss of lives was inevitably felt deeply at home. The 100th anniversary provides an opportunity to commemorate the service and sacrifice of those who lost their lives in the battle, to reflect upon the human cost of conflict and to give hope for a more peaceful world. The battle was fought along a 25-kilometre front north of the River Somme in the Somme region of northern France, between the towns of Arras and Albert. Following 2 years of trench warfare, the Allies planned a breakthrough of the German front lines on the Western Front. For a number of months, the French had been taking severe losses at Verdun, which is to the east of Paris. To help relieve the French, the Allied High Command decided to attack the Germans to the north of Verdun, therefore requiring the Germans to move some of their men away from the Verdun battlefield. 100 years ago, on the 1st of June 1916, along the dusty lanes of the Somme, in and around the old villages behind the front, the men of Rawlinson's Fourth Army were already beginning their preparations for the big push. Hard as it is for us to imagine today, these men were not dreading what was coming. The majority had trained for this moment for more than a year. They had a sense of duty that is almost impossible for us to comprehend now. They felt as if they were part of something far bigger than just themselves. For many, this was the first time they had seen battle. For 7 days prior to going over the top, they rained shells on the German front line, believing this would destroy the defences in place. Over 1.7 million artillery shells were fired during those 7 days. It was said to be mightily impressive, but it failed to destroy many deep dugouts and left great sections of wire inadequately cut. There was widespread confidence that the bombardment had done so much damage to the German first position that the infantry, moving steadily in lines, would simply have to occupy shattered trenches. But it soon became clear when the attacks began at 7:30 on the 1st of July that the defenders were still in good heart. At 7:28 in the morning, a mine at La Rochelle was detonated. So huge was the explosion, it was heard in Downing Street, 150 miles away. This was the start of that fateful day that became the worst in British military history. The start of the infamous Battle of the Somme. Many soldiers facing battle for the first time climbed out of their trenches and, following orders to walk calmly over no man's land, faced heavy machine gun fire. The Germans, alerted that a raid was imminent as the guns fell silent, left their intact dugouts and prepared themselves to fight. The Battle of the Somme was synonymous with Powell's battalions. These were a British phenomenon, encouraged by the British Army, as it was recognised in order to encourage enlistment, men were more likely to join and stick together in battle if they were with their friends. The stark reality of this meant that on this day, whole villages and sections of towns lost their men. One of the most harshly born examples was the Accrington Pals who were at Serre, and of 720 who fought on that day, 584 were killed, wounded or missing. Few, if any, of the town's population could have been untouched by the tragedy. A century ago, the world was in its last gasps of innocence as the brutal reality of 20th century warfare was out to demonstrate its terrible power on that summer's day on the Somme. A generation of men at the apex of their life and the summit of their pride walked into machine gun oblivion. We should never forget that black day, and the Somme generation should be seen as so much more than simply bodies lying shattered in no man's land. They sacrificed their innocence for our freedom, and today we will remember them.
Okay, well, thank you, Fiona, for a very excellent start to our memorial service. Excellent background history on why the Battle of the Somme happened. I'm very proud to be speaking before all of you today. Our 13 students from Harbour Primary, I've had the honour of working with you on several occasions, so it makes me very happy to see you here. It makes me happy to see public, parents and family of the students as well. And I'd also like to thank Rudyard Kipling Primary School for joining us on this special day as well. Of course, Rudyard Kipling is synonymous with the First World War. He gave us those immortal words that are on the headstones of unknown soldiers. At the bottom of the headstone, underneath a soldier of the Great War, Rudyard Kipling gave us the words, "Known unto God." He gave us those words, and those are the only words that tell us of those British soldiers who are in a grave but no one knew who they were. And he also gave his own son, and he died, Rudyard Kipling's son died at the Battle of Loos in 1915. So Rudyard Kipling as well, one of our great authors, gave many things towards the First World War. So as Fiona had said earlier, it's hard to believe that many men, while preparing for this battle, they had a great deal of stoicism and belief in the righteousness of their cause. Take, for example, 2nd Lieutenant Eric Rupert Heaton of the 16th Service Battalion of the Public Schools Middlesex Regiment, who wrote this letter home to his parents on the 28th of June 1916. My darling mother and father, I am writing this on the eve of my first action. Tomorrow we go to the attack in the greatest battle the British Army has ever fought. I cannot quite express my feelings on this night, and I cannot tell if it's God's will that I shall come through. But if I fall in battle, then I have no regrets, save for my loved ones I leave behind. It is a great cause, and I came out willingly to serve my king and country. This life abroad has taught me many things, chiefly the fine character of the British race to put up with hardship and the wonderful cheerfulness. If I fall, do not let things be black for you. Be cheerful, and you will be living life always to my memory. Well, I cannot write more now. You are all in my thoughts as I enter this first battle. May God go with me. With my love to you all, always, your loving son, Eric. Lieutenant Heaton was killed in action near Beaumont Hamel on the 1st of July 1916. He was just 19 years old. As the campaign of the Somme progressed, that same cheerful spirit of the British Army was still present, as no doubt the soldiers tried to shield their loved ones from the true horror that they were living in. But the reality of war and the hardships of trench life are more apparent in some letters than others, and on the 25th of September 1916, a Lieutenant Cyril Catford of the 116th Battalion Durham Light Infantry wrote these lines. My darling, surely truth is stranger than fiction. Last night I had a most excellent sleep in no man's land during a fairly heavy bombardment, such as practically continuous in this greatest battle of the war. I am pleased to say that I got the whole company back without a single casualty. As a matter of fact, up to the present, my company, Y Company, proverbial for their luck in the battalion, have had only 15 casualties, whereas other companies have lost at least 50% of their personnel. Of course, since it has been so stated in the papers, there is no harm in telling you that we were in the great attack on the 15th, which was the Battle of Flers Courcelette. Our artillery simply blew the Germans to bits, and naturally their artillery, which is both powerful and very efficient, was not at all pleasant. There is very little to say about the big show, except that artillery is awful and the flies are worse, whilst conditions of the living are worse still. All the same, we are exceptionally cheerful. We bear everything, I hope, like good soldiers, proud to have beaten thoroughly the reputed, invincible German army. The men are absolutely wonderful. My company is in the best of spirits, and I think that you might send out 1,000 woodbines for them. Well, I think I've given you some idea of what it is like out here. Men live and die like heroes, and face with the greatest of courage that which no men ought to be called upon to face. I can say no more. Sadly, Lieutenant Catford also died on the Somme on the 5th of October 1916, aged 26. The final line of his letter sums up what most feel when looking back on the Battle of the Somme, and I indeed will also say no more.
This year, the children at Harbour Primary School in Year 6 have studied both World War I and World War II, and we've worked very closely with local historian Jenny Flood, who has helped us with some fantastic investigations into the stories of local soldiers. This week we have been studying the Battle of the Somme in particular, and this has inspired the children to write some poetry, which they'd like to share with you.
My comrades lay in a puddle of scarlet red, their faces struck with blind patriotism. Heavy with wounds, they faced me, motionless. We moaned when we got no fighting, but groaned when we lay there half dead. We trudged forward towards the relentless flood of machine guns. Knowing death was nigh, no man's land was our path to it. Fractured thoughts swimming through my damaged mind. Reality so distorted, I'm not surprised to spot such beasts. Ferocious metal murderers, roaring, screaming. Man-made tanks to bulldoze German existence.
Every man dreaming about home, fear of death.
Hughes was born in New Haven. He enlisted into the 2nd Battalion of the Royal Sussex
Together as well, into the 2nd Battalion of the Royal Sussex Regiment. They trained for war at New Haven. They were then killed in action as well, together, on the Somme, on the 2nd of September 1916. They were killed by the same shell. They were 21 years old. Frank was buried at the Delville Woods Cemetery, and Herbert is remembered on the Teepervale Memorial.
Private Bert Dean, 150063. Private Bert Dean, born in New Haven, 1888, and emigrated to Canada in 1913. He enlisted into the 1st Battalion of the Canadian Machine Gun Corps. He was killed in action on the Somme on the 4th of September 1916 at 28 years of age. He is buried at Sunken Road Cemetery and remembered on New Haven Town Memorial and St Michael's Church Memorial.
Lance Corporal Frederick Goldsmith, 17343. Lance Corporal Frederick Goldsmith was born in New Haven in 1891, and he enlisted into the 15th Service Battalion of the Hampshire Regiment. He was killed in action on the Somme on the 15th of September 1916. He was 25 years old, and he is buried at the Bulls Road Cemetery.
Lance Corporal James Mockford, 15938. Lance Corporal James Mockford, born in New Haven. He enlisted as a private into the Coldstream Guards. He was killed in action on the Somme on the 16th of September 1916. He is buried at the Guards Cemetery at Les Bouffes.
Private George Lower, G5670. Private George Lower was born in New Haven. He enlisted into the 2nd Battalion of the Royal Sussex Regiment at New Haven. He was killed in action on the Somme on the 27th of September 1916. He is remembered on the Tipreval Memorial, the New Haven Town Memorial, and the memorial inside St Michael's Church in New Haven Town.
Private Edward Hubert Levy, G16317. Private Edward Hubert Levy was born in New Haven in 1891. He enlisted into the 12th Battalion of the Royal Sussex Regiment. He died on the 17th of October 1916 from wounds he received on the Somme. He was 25 years old. He is buried at Comte British Cemetery.
Private Alfred John East, G18019. Alfred John East lived in New Haven and worked as a dock labourer. He enlisted into the 13th Battalion of the Royal Sussex Regiment. He was killed in action on the Somme on the 21st of October 1916. He was 28 years old. He is remembered on the Tipreval Memorial, New Haven Town Memorial, and the memorial inside St Michael's Church, New Haven.
Private Joseph William White, G13475. Private Joseph William White lived in New Haven and worked as a ship's steward. He enlisted into the Queen's Royal West Surrey Regiment. He was killed in action on the Somme on the 8th of November 1916. He was 30 years old. He is remembered on the Tipreval Memorial and New Haven Town Memorial.
Lance Corporal Egbert Harold Suter, 28167. Lance Corporal Egbert Harold Suter was born in New Haven in 1884. He initially enlisted as a private into the Royal Sussex Regiment at Brighton, but was later transferred to the East Surrey Regiment, and he was promoted to Lance Corporal. He was killed in action on the Somme on the 18th of November 1916. He was 31 years old. He is buried at the Regina Trench Cemetery in Grand Court.
Would you all stand, please? They shall grow not old, as we thus left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. We will remember them.
On behalf of all of us here at New Haven Fort, I'd like to say thank you once more again to the wonderful students of Year 6 at Harbour Primary. I feel you will all agree did an excellent job of representing the 13 men of New Haven that lost their lives during the Great Battle of the Somme. So thank you, Year 6 of Harbour Primary School. Thank you to Fiona, who's come up to read the background and the history of the Somme and the exhortation. And thank you parents and families that have come to see your children do this. And thank you again, everyone else, public and Rudyard Kipling School, that have joined us for this very special service as well today. So thank you again.